Hello. Today in the studio we have with us Mr. Stan Lee, who is the publisher of Marvel Comics. And today he's going to tell us a little bit about how he got started and etc. Now, the Marvel Age began in 1961 with Fantastic Four. Is that correct?
Right. That was our first book in the so-called Marvel Age of comics, which revolutionized all of literature, as we all know.
How did you come up with this idea?
Well, actually, it wasn't even an original idea. The fellow who was then the publisher said to me, I was the editor at the time and the head writer. That doesn't mean I wrote heads. I was the chief writer.
Okay.
And he said to me, you know, Stan, I found out that DC Comics has a book called The Justice League, and it's selling pretty well. And maybe we ought to do a book with a lot of superheroes. So I figured, okay. So right away it started out as a copy, but I said, I'm not going to copy the Justice League. I never can remember it was the Justice League or the Justice Society. It was one of those. So I figured, okay, if we have to do a team, that's fine, but we're going to do it differently than anybody else does it. So instead of a lot of good guys who always won at the end and they were brilliant and they were superior to the villains and they never did anything wrong, we came up with the Fantastic Four, who inevitably did something wrong, and they weren't really that much better than the bad guys. And I would like to think that the stories were unexpected and you never knew what was going to happen next. And that started all of this magnificence.
Is this your formula? Like the good guys aren't always good?
I didn't know it was a formula at the time. I thought it was just sort of a cute idea to do something different. I would hope that our stories really aren't formularized. What we try to do is make them realistic. In other words, it's not a case of saying, hey, we'll always make the good guys not perfect, but it's a case of saying people aren't perfect. So the good guys won't be always right. The bad guys won't be always bad. We'll even give them some redeeming features. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure that even you know some people you don't like who aren't total monsters, who have some virtues. And as I say, it was the ridiculous notion was let's try to inject realism in comic books. And somehow the juxtaposition of the fantasy and the realism seems to have struck a chord.
With the people, the
right.
Four people that you used?
Well, with, of course, the more intelligent people.
Oh, yes. Do you do anything with these characters anymore?
You mean, are we still producing them? Oh, absolutely. The Fantastic Four is still one of our top-selling characters, books, I should say. And we now have Spider-Man, the Hulk, the Mighty Thor, and about 40 others.
Well, how did you develop your concept along the lines of your plot line?
Actually, we work a little bit differently than most other companies, or even differently than we worked in the beginning. Initially, comic books were done just like a play. You would write a script, where in a play you would write Act 1, Scene 1. The protagonist enters from stage left and does so and such. With a comic, we would write Page 1, Panel 1. The superhero enters from a doorway and leaps through a window or so. But it was the same format, and then you'd put the dialogue in, following the stage directions. Well, in the beginning, and I don't mean during Genesis, I mean during just the beginning of comics, I was writing most of the stories, or if not all of them, at Marvel, and I found I was having trouble keeping up with the artists. For example, one artist would be doing the Fantastic Four, one artist would be doing Spider-Man, one would be doing the Hulk. And I'd be writing a Fantastic Four story, and the artist who does Spider-Man would come in and say, hey, Stan, I need a script. You know, I finished the one I was doing, but there I am doing the Fantastic Four, and I can't stop because I don't have that great a brain anyway, and if I lose the thought, it'll never come back to me. So just as a necessary expedient, I would say to the artist, look, I tell you what, I don't have time to write your script. But he needed a script. He couldn't wait because we have a production schedule. So I'd say, I'll tell you what the plot is. You just go home and draw anything, and as long as it follows my plot, bring the drawings in. By then, I'll have finished this story, and I'll put the dialogue and the captions on your artwork. Well, I found in that way, I was able to keep a lot of artists busy at once. I would just tell them a basic plot. They would draw anything. I never knew what to expect. Sometimes I didn't even recognize the story. It was different than what I had told them. So it kept me awake. It was like doing crossword puzzles. I was trying to make some sense out of these nutty drawings that they would bring in, and I was keeping everybody busy, and ever since then, that's the way we've worked. I don't write the stories now, but the writer and the artist discuss the plot. The artist just draws the story any way he sees it. Then the drawings go to the writer, and he puts the dialogue balloons and the captions in.
You say you're not writing them anymore?
No, I stopped about 5 years ago when I think the only way they felt they could get rid of me was to make me the publisher. So since I became the publisher, I'm now involved in very high-level things like interviews here at this college and, you know, urgent and cogent things like that. And other people are doing the writing. It's a sad day for American letters, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Has it changed your heroes any?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, see, we try to give the writer freedom. I don't try to tell the writers how to do it. Now, we have a character, Spider-Man is our best-selling book, actually, and he used to have a girlfriend. He was mad about her. I made her up, named Gwen Stacy. In fact, her hair was a little like yours. And one day when I gave up after having written more than 100 issues of Spider-Man consecutively from the beginning, which represents, I guess, about 10 years of Spider-Man, when I gave up the book, I gave it to another writer, and he said, how shall I write it? And I said, well, you know, any way at all, as long as it's good. And then I took a trip somewhere on a lecture tour, and when I came back, I found out Gwen Stacy was dead. He had killed her. And I said, when I said do it any way you want, I didn't mean kill off all the characters. But it was too late to do anything about it. So
Gwen was gone.
Poor Gwen, yeah.
Do you have a specific target audience?
Oh, just anybody who can read, anybody who's literate. It used to be, again, that comics were just for little kids. Or they were thought to be for little kids.
But that's changed.
Yeah. With Marvel, because we started directing Marvel at ourselves, really. The theory was we're going to write the kind of stories we would enjoy reading, you see. And I didn't know if it would work or not, but it worked better than anybody expected because we grabbed a lot of readers who were much older, who liked the kind of things that we liked, but we didn't lose the young kids. So we ended up, we have kids 7 years old who read Marvel, who don't understand the subtle implications and ramifications and the psychology and philosophy and the subliminal moralizing, but they love the nutty characters and the long underwear and the colorful costumes. And the older readers enjoy all the little subplots and the little asides we put in and the little things that a young kid can't ever grasp, but they're there in the story.
You've reached a happy medium.
Yeah. So we find the best formula, if you call it that, is we don't try to write for any audience. We try to write stories we would enjoy. And apparently there are enough people in the world who have the same tastes. I hate to say that. I'd like to think my taste was far better, but apparently everybody must have pretty much the same taste because the books sell pretty well.
Well, how's your competition been?
Miserable.
Really?
No, they've been trying to catch up. They're doing the best they can, bless their innocent little hearts. And we used to have a lot of fun with them because when we
like
started...
Superman?
Yeah. When we started out selling them... You said it, I didn't. When we started out selling them, they used to... And I know this because we have friends who work for that company and we get these reports. They'd start having conferences. How come Marvel is selling so much better? And they'd study our books and they'd say, you know... I noticed they use a lot of red on their covers. Maybe that's it. And they'd start putting a lot of red on their covers. The minute we'd learn of that, we would take all the red off our covers. And our books still sold better, and that would drive them crazy. Then they'd say they use a lot of dialogue balloons on the covers, and they'd start doing that. So we would take the dialogue balloons off. And that drove them crazy, and it never occurred to them. It's just that we take the work a little more seriously, and maybe we have a little bit more of a sense of humor, and maybe people don't like things that are stuffy. They like things that are a little bit whimsical or humorous. But don't you go telling that to DC.
Okay.
That's just between us.
Okay. How did your success with the newspapers come about?
You mean the newspaper strip? Well, for many years, the syndicates have been asking us to do Spider-Man or other of our characters in syndicated form. I haven't wanted to because I really didn't know how to. Silly as that may sound, producing a strip for a newspaper is so different